Hello, good morning. Welcome to Mission Solano and Walk the Talk Tours. This is the third installment of the Walk the Talk Tours. This one's going to be called No Water, No Life. Last month we talked about how not to spoil your soil, and before that we talked about the foundations of permaculture. All this is brought to you by Sustainable Solano. I'm very grateful for Sustainable Solano and their existence. Met them at the Tomato Festival of August of last year, and I've been following them around from workshop to workshop, event to event, and I've learned so many wonderful things about how to interact with nature and to work with her rather than against her. So, my name is Jeff Barton, and I am the owner of No Mo Nonsense Earth Care Services. This is one of the many changes that have occurred in my life since I met Sustainable Solano. I started volunteering and doing this work and fell in love with it. My sustainable sensei, Kathleen Huffman, said, "Hey, why don't you start a business doing this?" And I did. So call me if you have any services that the earth needs on your end of the world. Nobody likes pain in the grass. That's my motto. So, clicking right along if it catches up. Today's talk, no water, no life. No water, no life. There is our lovely planet. Where would we be without her, right? If I was an intergalactic explorer coming from some other galaxy and I saw this planet, I'd probably call it the planet water because there's so much of it, right? It's pretty obvious. But we're going to get further into that, but in case you missed it, the last couple talks, these are a couple things that we talked about. This is why we're here. We came to comprehend the need to protect our seeds and the fruits they will bear from the weeds and the roots they will tear. So who are our seeds? Well, these are my seeds right there. And, they're bigger now. A little food and water makes them grow. But when I started seeing the world through their eyes, I realized that there are just so many things that I wanted to do to be part of the solution and not the problem. I want to hand these kids a better scenario than that which was handed to me. And I'm going to do that with permaculture as my pathway. These are the ethics of permaculture. We talked about this the first month. Earth care, people care, and fair share. Forgive me for blasting past that. These are very foundational and important ethics, so I'm going to go back to that. We always go back to this in permaculture. When we're doing permaculture design and ethics and going by these principles, we're always going to go back to our ethics and make sure that we're taking care of the earth, we're taking care of people, and we're sharing our surplus. Is there a problem? Is everything okay? So yeah, what is permaculture? It's right outside the door. It's many different things. I'm going to give you a couple of definitions, and whichever one works for you. Please take it and run with it. Permaculture is also known as ecological or regenerative design. According to Oxford, it's development of agricultural ecosystems intended to be sustainable, self-sufficient. It's kind of a combination of two words, permanent and culture. Used to be permanent agriculture, permanent horticulture, but it has evolved to include more than just working with the earth and the land, but actually social systems and invisible structures and things that we'll talk more about in future talks. It's a way of working with nature rather than against nature. You compose with nature instead of imposing upon her, and we use regenerative systems to design and shape our environments. Okay, so that's what's going on out the door. And the foundation of permaculture, again, and we're right smack dab in the middle, and that's where we always try to find ourselves, where we're taking care of all three of the ethics at the same time. So you are here. Okay, talked about how not to spoil your soil last month. I'll be giving that talk again for those that missed it on August 18th in Benicia. The location is to be announced. But now, today, we are going to dive into what is water? Where does our water come from? How much water is there? And I put in parentheses coming from gratitude. I'm going to explain that later. You'll see some things. How do we manage water? Honoring our pain. What is water doing? Seeing with new eyes. And how can we better manage water? Okay, going forth. Now, in parentheses, this is coming from the work that reconnects. This is one of the most powerful experiences that I've had in my permaculture design course that I'm taking. We worked with a lady that took us through this process and asked us if we were talking with somebody that was from the 7th generation from now, somebody that lives 200 years from now, how would we respond to a question like, what's it like to live in 2018? I hear there's all these things that are going on with the environment and political struggles and social strife and all these things, and what's it like? And this process of doing the work that reconnects and taking part in this great turning from a society that is in decay to implementing and designing the society and the systems that we want to take part in and that are going to heal the earth and give back to the environment. This process is something that helps us to continue to stay grounded and to keep moving forward in the face of adversity. Okay, so we start with gratitude. I'd like to start today with a little bit of gratitude when it comes to water. I've never really had to know thirst. I'm grateful for that. There are people on the planet that when they're thirsty, they don't have a drink of water. And sometimes when they do, that drink of water isn't clean and it's going to cause health concerns and problems for them. So I'm just grateful that I've never really had to know thirst, and I think that's something that when I think about that, it keeps me grounded, you know what I mean, and it puts things in perspective because there are people on the planet that do suffer from that. So we go from gratitude to honoring our pain. Honoring our pain is a process of recognizing all of the things that are really harming us as a species and as human beings, individuals, things that isolate us. There was this wonderful analogy of trees that were grown in a biodome. I don't know if you guys have heard of Earth 2.0, but they had all these, different species of plants and all these things, and the trees were planted and they started growing, and they got to a certain level, and then they just all started kind of just keeling over and falling. And the reason why is because they didn't have any wind, and they didn't have any adversity that was kind of pushing them back and forth. And when trees encounter this adversity, they have a wood in the middle that's called their heartwood. And the more adversity that they encounter is the thicker that this heartwood becomes. And so this is one of the reasons why you don't want to stake a tree too tight, because it will actually inhibit the tree's ability to grow strong and to be structurally sound. So we're going to go from honoring our pain to seeing with new eyes, and we're going to talk more about that and going forth. Please check this work out if you get a chance. The work that reconnects, the author's name is Joanna Macy, and she wrote a book called Coming Back to Life. And there's another one that I don't remember the title, but I can get that to you. Okay, so we're also going to discuss permaculture principles, catch and store energy. This is from a condensation line of air conditioning that's right outside of my apartment complex. Drip, drip, drip all the time, and I decided to catch and store that. I'm getting about 2 gallons a day plus from just that source. We're also going to discuss the permaculture principles of apply self-regulation and feedback. There needs to be some self-regulation there and some feedback on why are we watering the sidewalk. And then also pato, which is another way of saying protracted and thoughtful observation. Okay, those are permaculture principles that we work with, and that's one. Pato is one of the ones we start with. We're going to talk about that. So last month we pointed out this picture, and I asked what was wrong with this, and obviously it's the foundation, right? It's not stable. The more you keep building, if you play this game Jenga, you keep stacking stuff on top, eventually everything's going to come crashing down. This is soil, right? So technology and Facebook and new iPhone and all this cool stuff you keep putting on top of it, that's soil. This is water, okay? If this is soil, then that's the water table. And there is no soil without water. So water is the foundation of life, okay? So what is water? It's a wonderful molecule, truly wonderful. Acts as the medium for the procreation and sustenance of all life. Things can live without oxygen, but there is nothing known on the planet that can live without water. It's the basis of nutrition and absorption for nutrients in plants and animals. It's a physical anomaly. Things, when they freeze, they tend to contract, but when water freezes, it expands. And that is why ice floats. And that actually, because it does that, it actually allows the water under the ice to stay fluid and allows sea life or lake life to stay alive, pond life. It's a universal solvent. Because of the way that it's structured molecularly, it actually wears away at minerals and makes them available in liquid form, makes them soluble. So it's a planetary heat sink. Water takes 10 times the amount of energy to be raised by 1 degree Celsius as iron, and I think it takes 30 times the amount of energy as copper. And bottom line is it basically allows a lot of energy to be absorbed, and that energy is slowly redistributed. Bodies of water can keep areas cool in the summer and keep areas warm in the winter because of this particular molecular property. So water equals life equals us. We are water. I don't know if you guys have heard that as well. The majority of us are 60% water, and babies are 75% water. So yeah, some food for thought. Though we appear to be solid, we are in fact liquid bodies, similar in a way to gelatin. Seems to be solid, but it's actually water. We're gelled together by all this organic material that we have in our bodies. If water is the blood, the soil is the placenta, river courses are the veins, oceans are the compartments of the heart, and the atmosphere is a giant aorta, right, of this life system. I'm doing a project in Santa Cruz right now, and I thought that this would be a wonderful kind of visual aid. That looks like veins to me, you know? It really is. Those are all waterways from the Santa Cruz watershed, and yeah, it really does kind of look like veins, you know? Mm-hmm. So, functions of water. As a gas, it carries heat around the globe, humidifies air streams. There's these things called sky rivers that actually carry moisture from one area of the continent to another. So that's one of the things that water does in gas form. Again, it's present at the conception of every life form, provides habitat, energy, good health, transportation. It's a freshwater reservoir, assists in climate stability, and acts as a preservative. When things are frozen, they tend to be preserved. And it also prunes trees, right? Ice on a branch will definitely keep it from growing. How much water is here on our planet? Okay, so 75% of our Earth's surface is covered by water. Of this total supply, only 3% is fresh water. Okay, the rest is salty water that we cannot drink at all. And of the fresh water, the 3% supply, less than 1% is readily accessible by human beings or for human consumption. Okay, so there's a lot of water, but there's not that much to drink. The rest, is locked in glaciers, in ice sheets, or in deep underground aquifers. So here's a great visual aid for that. There's all the water on the planet, right, represented by that. There is the fresh water on the planet, represented by that. And then if you guys can see that tiny little spot right there. Hey, hi, welcome. If you can see that spot right there, that represents the amount of water that we actually have access to. So, welcome.
Hi.
We haven't gotten too far into things, just kind of talking about water, grateful for...
I couldn't find it. I've been walking around for 15 minutes and everyone's giving me a different building. I knocked on the front office, so that's fine. I'm here. Thanks.
I'm sorry about that.
That's right.
So yeah, we're just talking about water. I explained a process called the work that reconnects, and we start with gratitude in the work that reconnects, and then we move from that into honoring our pain, which is basically dealing with adversity and honoring what adversity does for us as human beings. Like a tree, when a tree is blown back and forth by the wind, the adversity makes it stronger. And so, yeah, we're talking about that, and then going into how much water there is on the planet. There is 75% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, but only 3% of that is fresh water that we can actually drink. And of that 3%, less than 1% of that is actually accessible in consumption. What's the word I'm looking for? For human consumption, excuse me. So yeah, where does it come from? That's a loaded question. It's everywhere. It's always moving around. It defies human boundaries and human ownership. It goes to the air, it's vapor, it's under the surface, it's on the surface, it's in the soil, it's in the glaciers. And the mobility of water complicates human affairs at many levels. So we're going to go from the gratitude, and one of the things I said, I've never really had to be thirsty. That's one of the things I'm grateful for. I've never really known thirst, you know. There are people on the planet, when they're thirsty, they don't have immediate access to water. And then those that do, sometimes they can't drink clean water, they have to drink dirty water. So that's something that I'm grateful for. But we're going to move from gratitude now to honoring our pain. And we're going to talk a little bit about where our water comes from. This is where things start to get a little bit complex. Fairfield's municipal water supply comes from the North Bay Aqueduct, which is part of the California State Water Project. And the entitlements that Fairfield is where its water comes from are via entitlements owned by the Solano County Water Agency, who has actually provided a grant to Sustainable Solano to go out and do the wonderful work that we're doing. Sassoon City's water actually comes from Lake Berryessa, and that's via entitlements from a joint powers authority of the Sassoon Solano Water Authority, which is a government entity, formed by the city of Sassoon and Solano Irrigation District. So you'll find that the more that we go into where water is coming from and how it's being used and distributed, things get much more convoluted and complex. We're going to go into that a little bit more. How do we manage water? Pave it, pipe it, drain it. That has been the paradigm for society and you know, the civilized world for a long time. Just some statistics on the water project and its vast scale. It's providing water to 23 million people. 70% is going to urban areas, 30% in the Central Valley. This water is actually pumped up and over mountains using an extreme amount of electricity. The California State Water Project is the largest consumer of power in the state because of these pumps and having to pump water. The single highest water lift in the world is actually part of the State Water Project, and that's going up almost 2,000 feet over the choppy mountains. So there's 21 dams, 700 miles of canals and pipelines and tunnels. Provides an estimated annual benefit to the economy of $400 billion a year. So that's a lot of money. Other water projects, the Los Angeles Aqueduct, it uses 80,000 horsepower pumps that can fill an Olympic pool in 6 seconds to pump water 338 miles to Los Angeles. That's not the only place that LA gets its water from. It actually has the water from the California River Aqueduct as well. It stretches 242 miles. Tunnels, conduit, canals, underground siphons, 5 pumping stations, all to get that over to Riverside so that the people in Los Angeles can use that water. New York pulls water from 120 miles away. One leaking pipe can cost $250 million to repair. One pipe was actually leaking 20 million gallons a day. And all of this, again, the complexity is one of the things that I'm trying to point out. Before the water is released, it's treated with chlorine, it's treated with fluoride, it's treated with sodium hydroxide, it's treated with orthophosphates, which actually they use to line old pipes and coat them to prevent lead from leaching into the water itself. And that actually is what created the crisis in Flint, Michigan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that is an ongoing crisis where the city of Flint used to get water from Detroit, which did treat it with orthophosphate. Detroit canceled said that their lease was up at the same time that Flint was actually trying to go and get water from another source. So Flint decided to save money and to kind of deal with this sense of urgency to go over to the Flint River. It didn't use corrosion control. The Flint River had been polluted for years and years. And so there were corrosive capabilities and properties in the water that actually ate at the pipes and actually leached lead into the water supply, exposing over 6,000 children. And that's when kids get exposed to lead, it causes major learning disabilities and just malfunctions there. So it's an ongoing crisis, something to be aware of. Why am I bringing all this up? Because we need to be aware of the complexity of where our water is coming from and what that entails, what comes along with that. There are potential risks associated with anywhere you're getting your water, but when we're getting it from the city, we can talk about the toxins, we can also talk about rationing and uncontrollable price increases. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Cape Town, South Africa, but Cape Town, South Africa is a Mediterranean population of 4 million people, and as a town itself, it is actually running out of water. I haven't checked out the most recent update, but they've been counting down and then they've been pushing out their day zero. It used to be in April, and they basically have been rationing people to less and less water per day. The last I heard, they were down to 10 gallons a day for per person. And so, please look into that and check it out and recognize that this is something that actually can happen to major metropolises and major cities. If you're getting water from a rain or a tank, the quality could be uncertain if you have acid rain or industrial waste that's happening and pollution in the area. But you can still use it for second-class water. Second-class water is for like washing your dog, your car, your clothes, things like that, but not for cooking or not for drinking. So if you have a spring, it could dry up. If you have a river, you don't know what's upstream, it could not necessarily be reliable or safe. Same thing with snowmelt canals, it could be polluted uphill. If you're going down in the earth and you're going in aquifers, that water is down there and it's serving a special function and it's doing something for ecosystems in the environment that we don't fully understand, but it's something that we can cause a lot of problems by going into the ground and taking the water out. Santa Cruz County is actually gets 80% of their water from aquifers, which are overdrafted. They're pulling out more from the ground than actually can be restored on a yearly basis, and that's a recipe for disaster. It can lead to salinity. It also leads to subsidence, if you guys aren't familiar with subsidence or salinity. Salinity is when the ground basically becomes too salty to grow anything in. And that can happen by siphoning fresh water, and that siphons the salt water level up, especially with aquifers that are below sea level, and it creates a salt concentration in the soil that needs to be flushed out before you can grow anything. So subsidence is actually the sinking of land as a result of depleting aquifers. These are some pretty stunning visual aids here. That says 1925, that says 1955, and that says 1977, and that is subsidence in the San Joaquin Valley. This is a lady that's also from the U.S. Geological Survey. That says 1965, and that says 2013, and that is a leak of over, a sink of over 7 feet. And then here's another one in the I think that's San Andreas Valley, forgive me, or San Joaquin. I'm sorry, guys. But from 1988, that's where the level used to be, 2004, 2008, and 2013. It's a very real thing, and it actually causes a lot of property damage over time. So we're going to go from that. Again, we're honoring our pain. One of the analogies that I've heard is a tree goes down into the darkness to get its nutrients and get what it needs, and then it grows and it goes out into the world and it bears its fruit. And so that's what we're doing here. Bless you, by the way. So some global water statistics. Dirty water is killing more children than violence over the planet. That is really, really major. I got this from Maud Barlow, who was a speaker at the Right Livelihood Conference. She's the co-founder of the Blue Planet Project and the co-author of a book called Blue Gold. 2 billion people are drinking dirty water every day on Earth. That's, again, something that I've never really had to know, and I'm grateful to live in areas that are abundant, but is there any way that I could take part in a process that makes it more abundant for other people across the planet, you know? And there is a way, and we're going to talk about that. According to the UN, can I get a time check? 10:30? Okay. According to the UN, by 2030, the global demand for water will outstrip the supply by 40%. That is something we're going to experience in the next 12 years of our lives, and by 2050, 7 billion people are going to be affected by that. Water is something we really have to pay attention to. The things we're doing to water, we're overusing it, we're polluting it, we're doing all these horrible things to the most precious foundation of the foundation of life. Industrial runoff from groundwater contamination or algal bloom, leads to groundwater contamination or algal blooms. If you guys have heard of the Gulf of Mexico, there is a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico due to industrial and agricultural runoff that has led to, it's the size of New Jersey. It's 9,000 square miles. And you get these algal blooms that are feeding off the nitrogen and the excess nutrients from the synthetic fertilizers, and they basically take over all life in that area, and the only thing that can survive are algae and jellyfish. So, yeah, the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. It's not just in the Gulf of Mexico, it's happening across the planet. And then mining, and what we're doing with fracking and going under the ground and trying to get these natural gases, we're using tons and tons of water that we not just use water alone, it's mixed with all these chemicals and things to break up the sheetrock and stuff. And so there's a wonderful documentary you can check out that has more information about that called Gasland. So here's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We're almost out of the darkness, you guys. This is something that we need to be aware of. There are 5 gyres on the planet, and a gyre is basically where the flow and the current of the ocean ends up kind of creating a circular phenomenon, and the water ends up kind of being still. Well, in the North Pacific Gyre, we have a Great Pacific Garbage Patch that is actually estimated to be twice the size of Texas. It's hard for them to understand exactly how big this is because of what happens with plastic in the sea. The sun breaks it down into what they call microplastics, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and a lot of it's under the surface, and it's hard to determine what's going on. But if you guys have ever seen Blue Planet, I highly recommend that. You can find that on Netflix. The Blue Planet series by BBC. It's narrated by David Attenborough, but they talk about what actually is happening with the plastics and how it gets into the food chain. And they suspect that dolphins are actually losing their babies through the breast milk because of this accumulation of these toxins. because they're an apex predator at the top of the food chain. So little microorganism eats the plastic, and then the bigger organism eats that one, and then the bigger one eats that, and it just gets concentrated. So anyhow, we're going to move forward now. We're going to see with new eyes, what's our water doing? Where is it coming from on the site? How does it enter? How does it leave? Usually it's coming in from rain. Sometimes it's running off, and then we're using the city's water supply. How it's exiting, it's going in the sewer. It's running on, I should say, when it's coming in. It's running off when it's leaving. It's going to the sewer. It's either evaporating through transpiration, which is the evaporation of water through plants, or it's infiltrating into the soil. So, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, this is how we are using our water typically in our house. I'm going to start speeding things up here so we can get outside. Forgive me. But yeah, you can look at those statistics. A majority of the water is being used outside. So we're going to get some water wisdom from protracted and thoughtful observation. And I'm going to invite everybody to do this, to do a water audit here. We should know how much water we're using. We should know where it's coming from, and we should know where it's going. The World Health Organization, says we need 2 liters a day, which is about a half gallon, a little over that, and about 12 gallons for washing clothes, dishes, and ourselves. That is a very, very conservative figure. So, conducting a water audit. Easiest way is look at your bills. Or you can manually calculate it by reading your meter. It's a little bit more complex that way. Or you can calculate it based on the time and the amount that's used, and that's even more, time-consuming and involving, but it's important to know how much you're using so you can know how much you need to secure for the future. So these are ways to kind of calculate those things. I turned on my faucet and I filled up a gallon of water, and it took about 50 seconds to fill up a gallon, so it's 1.2 gallons a minute. Determine how much you're using daily, how much you're using weekly, how much you're using yearly. And once you figure that out, then we'll talk about ways to save it. Outside is where most of the water is being used. Mulch, mulch, mulch. It really saves a lot of water. It keeps water from evaporating from the soil. Select correct plants and their conditions. Native plants, drought-tolerant plants, perennials, things that are not going to be really thirsty. When you are watering your plants, use drip irrigation, not sprinklers. Way more efficient that way. Fix leaks. If you saw that last statistic, 10% of the water we're using in our house is actually going to leaks. I pointed those pictures out from the AC that I'm getting, and I'll show you a picture of the leak that I'm catching when I do turn on my irrigation. Replace your toilets or fix them. You can use food coloring and put it in the tank, and then come back, about 30 minutes later and see if that food coloring is seeping into the tank after you flush the toilet. And that'll let you know that your flap is actually not sealing correctly, so you're going to want to replace that. Or you can actually, if you have the money, replace your toilet and get a more efficient one. There's this wonderful quote: if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Little toilet humor for you, but that is one way to really save a lot of water. But really, if we're starting from first principles, using water to dispose human waste is a bad idea. It converts pristine drinking quality water directly into sewage in one step. It pollutes groundwater. It disperses a once concentrated pollutant across miles of pipe and waterway, and it turns potential fertilizer into poisonous garbage. This is from Toby Hemingway in his book, The Permaculture City. You can actually use your urine to satisfy 90% of your garden's nitrogen needs. I know that gets a little gross for some people, but if you can dilute it, you can actually use that, what is considered as waste, as a fertilizer. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with compost toilets as well, but that's something that, to me, again, it's kind of a no-brainer. I've taken part in it, and it seems like it's a handoff kind of thing, and it's yucky, but it really makes so much sense to catch and store our energy and put it back into the cycle rather than creating these huge waste stores. So, saving water. I'm going to blast through this. This is kind of obvious stuff. Replace your washing machine if it's a top loader, those use a lot, or use laundry landscape. Permaculture practice principles with water. We're going to reuse water as many times as possible before it leaves the site. And then I'm going to talk about this next month in a permaculture design talk on how you can actually biologically filter and clean your water before it leaves your site. So there's one of my leaks, right? When I turn on my irrigation, just rather than sit there and let it and getting behind there and fixing it, I just capture it and I use that to water my plants, right? So achieving water security. You're going to take what you learned about your water usage from your audit. You're going to calculate or gather the average rainfall. In Fairfield, it's about 25 inches. And you're going to use that to determine how much can be harvested. Now, there's a formula, and I'm going to talk to you guys about that out there. But you basically take the footprint of your roof from the aerial view, and you multiply that times the rainfall in feet on an annual basis, and then that is multiplied by a factor of 7.5 gallons, because 1 cubic meter of water is 7.5 gallons. So that's the harvestable gallons of water you can get off of your roof, which is a lot. We're going to talk about the numbers that are being saved out here. It's really a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money, a lot of water, which translates into money that you don't have to spend. So you take your daily and weekly use, and then you're going to calculate the longest period of a drought in your area, okay? And once you have that, let's say it's going to be 4 months, the longest we've gone in this area, 4 or 5 months without rain. I'm just guessing maybe. So you take your weekly use, or you put that into a monthly use, and then you have an idea of how much water you would need to actually secure and store for a period of drought. If you're using more than you're harvesting, you can increase your catchment, you can decrease your usage, or you can start to reuse your water with laundry landscape systems like we're going to talk about in detail out there. So, Greywater versus Blackwater. Greywater is laundry water, showers, and sinks, things that basically we're using to kind of wash things that can be reused. It's not carrying too many toxins. There can be some health concerns with it, but if you follow specific guidelines, it can be done very safely. It has been done safely for years and years and years, and there hasn't been any complications or health concerns as a result of using Greywater. So, Blackwater, anything coming from the toilet, anything you're washing diapers or any type of fecal matter or anything like that, that's Blackwater. That goes straight to the sewer. A lot of our municipalities are not distinguishing between these two, and that creates a problem called combined sewer overflow. When we get a lot of heavy rain, all this rain is sheeting off of our roofs and sheeting off all this impermeable surface and these concretes, and it's going into stormwater management, and it's being mixed in with sewage. Now, when that happens, it can overload the sewage treatment plant, and what it does to mitigate that is it basically sends what they call combined sewer overflow, which is diluted sewage, into waterways and rivers and what have you. City of New York, this is a major deal. They're spending $100 million a year now, and they just started installing bioswales. A bioswale is basically like a swale, but it's bigger, and it's used to catch more and more water, and they've been doing that to kind of keep the excess water from going into their stormwater management system. Okay, so we got to shift the paradigm, you guys. Okay, and I'm going to show you my hall of shame. This is over by the mall. This is my new pet peeve. I just can't stand to see water on an impermeable surface. I just know how much we're working with now. I know these figures, and it's just something that we have to stop as a species, you know. And there's a lot of work that's cut out for us. So I would say if we could just start at home, if this is something that's happening in our area, let's nip it in the bud. We need to shift our paradigm from pave it, pipe it, drain it, to, and waste it, to slow it, spread it, sink it. This is a swale that I dug. I call it the demon swale because it was very, very hard to dig. This is a rain downspout coming from the roof, and basically we hook that up to a pipe, and then when we get into this area, the pipe is perforated. It has a hole all the way through it. You dig this on contour, which means it's level with the land, and you're following along a line that goes, even on a hill, there's a line called the contour line that is a level line around that hill. So we dig our swales on contour, and we fill them up with mulch, and that helps us to slow, spread, and sink, and store the water, which does this. And I'm almost done. 2 more slides, 3 more slides. Major stuff. If we can slow our water down, okay, this is a great leverage point. One of the permaculture principles is you want to enact the greatest amount of change with the least amount of effort, okay? Call that a leverage point. If you can slow your water down by half of the speed that it's moving at right now, you can reduce its ability to actually carry sediment with it by 7/8, okay? That's a huge leverage point. If we can just slow the water down, we can prevent erosion and runoff, and talked about that in the soil talk. Erosion is a horrible thing for our planet. It creates desertification in the long run, and irrigation salinity in the short term. So, ways you can slow down water. All these ways slow down water: berms, brush, logs. If you have a river, there's ways to actually lay these things. They call them brush gideons, and you can lay them across the river to slow down and allow the silt to kind of settle rather than to move with the water. But it increases the water, and it actually increases the area, and spreading the water slows it down. Okay, so when you spread and you sink the water, or you slow the water and you spread it, it sinks it, and that recharges our aquifers. Okay, that's something that we really have to take part in as human beings now. We have to think about where our water is going, and is it possible for us to recharge the water that's underground? Give it places to go with berms and basins. Dish-shaped lawns, if you actually have the ability to conform your lawn that way, you kind of make it a little sunk in the middle and it'll hold water that way. You can do that with rain gardens as well. Add organic matter and soil busters, okay? Organic matter increases soil's water holding capacity greatly, okay? And then if you get some soil busting plants that are going to go down in there and break up the soil, then they're actually going to aerate it and make it kind of spongy and allow it to hold more water as well. Contour the soil with swales. I call them boomerangs, all right? It's 3 to 6 feet downhill from a tree, and it looks like a boomerang, and you just, kind of put a little berm, a little mound of dirt, and it actually slows the water down from sinking further down the hill. Water and trees go together like salt and pepper, you guys. I learned this with one of the Sustainable Solano workshops that I went to when I was learning from Greywater Action, pursuing the Greywater Action. So we learn about the water cycle and the hydrologic cycle, where it comes from the ocean and it evaporates and then it's sent into clouds, and then the clouds dump the water further inland. But there is a micro water cycle that actually happens with plants, and this is the reason why rainforests never go dry. They have so many plants that are transpiring this moisture back into the air, and it actually comes back down in the form of rain. And when you don't have that, you have what we call the heat island effect, where you pave over a lot of things, and it actually evaporates a lot of the moisture in the air, and that prevents the water from coming down, and that contributes to drought conditions. So, going forth, with all these options for saving, harvesting, and conservatively using our water, we should be able to reduce the burden on that resource that has all those intricacies and 99 miles of canals and this, that, and the other, and it costs a lot of money. So if we can reduce the burden that we're putting on that, and also, again, sending our rainwater to be mixed with sewage and all these things, we'll have more control of the quality of the water in our lives and the impact of its use, and we can be more secure that way. So that is the plan. Let us be lifesavers, right? And I'd like to invite you guys to join me outside. We're going to go over some water savings numbers and how we're saving over 100,000 gallons of water out there, and potentially a year. And I also want to point out that of all the problems that we were discussing today, all of the problems of the world, and I really believe this, can be solved in the garden. And this is something that I'm learning as a permaculture practitioner. So I'll show you my wall of shame real quick. Water wastage, boo. Boo. No, don't do that. Oh. Anyways, so that's not happening out there. There isn't any runoff happening on this site, and that's because of the way it's been designed. And if we can go forward as human beings and design our environments to take care of these problems, they will become solutions for us. So thank you guys. Appreciate you. And yeah, you can stop that and we'll go.